For the banded double leg pull, you're going to need a resistance band or loop, and that's going to go around the thighs just above the knees. You're also going to need something which you can do this exercise on top of. Now I've got a pretty handily placed and handy height plinth here. You could do this off the side of a bed, a couch, stack of pillows or something. But the reason for that is we want to start from a flexed hip position. So just in terms of what that looks like, you're going to come down over the side of whatever you've got, and you want to be able to rest comfortably with the edge of whatever you're on underneath your hip line. And then you're going to need to be able to hold on or have your arms outstretched. So it does need a little bit of prep work, this one, but for good reason. Now the point of this exercise is we want to work into that final part of hip extension, which is the thighs moving backwards away from the floor in this position. Now with the band around the legs, we're going to have to take the knees a little bit wide until we feel tension on the band. So you don't want too lax or light a band here. You want relatively strong tension with the knees together so that when you open them 6 to 8 inches and bring the heels together to touch, you feel there's a definitive pull on the band already. Now this, just like other exercises we've covered, wakes up the lateral sling, wakes up the external hip rotators and that glute compartment. So we're preemptively switching on quite a few muscle systems before we perform the movement. Now the glutes can, particularly the gluteus maximus as we're thinking about here, are going to facilitate external hip rotation but also a lot of hip extension. So get into a position where you are comfortable, and being on something, you're also going to have a neutral pelvic position most of the time. If you're over pillows or something, just make sure you're not too rounded and curved in the back. Now what we want to do is to bend the knees and then keep the heels squeezed. We've got the tension against the band already, and then in that pre-engaged position and keeping our pelvis and low back still, we move into hip extension. And then we lower back down. So there's our banded double leg kick. Now as you come up, what you don't want to feel is your stomach burying down into the floor, which will mean that your low back is extending too much and arching, and that pelvis is rocking forwards. And I can feel my back tightening up when I do that. Now it's not that, and I've mentioned this in previous exercises, it's not that when you're running, your low back doesn't go into extension. It does, but we want to try and train core stability with gluteal function and posterior chain function moving into hip extension without jeopardizing the low back getting annoyed in this context. So that's why you use your Pilates principles to maintain neutral. And you can kind of visualize placing a little blueberry or something underneath your belt line just here and not letting that get squashed. Now if we've got the knees bent substantially, that's going to be a different movement from if we've got the knees slightly extended. And you can certainly do both, and you'll feel the bias switch from hamstrings or lower down the leg through to the knee in terms of that double leg kick than if you're in a fully bent position. And it's worth just kind of playing around with that, but whichever one you're doing, you want to make sure that you're not sacrificing your neutral pelvic position and that you're maintaining tension on the band and you're squeezing those heels relatively firmly as you're doing it. Now if you want a really nice variation, you can come up into your lift and then keeping the heels squeezed and the knees pushed out, you can perform a double leg kick. Okay, now this is really going to get that posterior chain working, particularly into that back pocket. So this is a really nice way where you can access, you can prime, you can condition those external hip rotators, those hip extensors, simultaneously strengthen your core and really bulletproof that posterior line again, which, as I mentioned in one of the previous strength series exercises, is so important to make sure that that posterior chain of the leg is robust and bulletproof with regards to running. So the banded double leg kick and those little variations at the end, it kind of catches you off guard, particularly when you're bringing that knee straight in, that double knee straight and double knee kick. You really feel that kind of close packed work, but it's so valuable to get that conditioning done in that position because it kind of replicates being up on your feet and getting that inner range control, that posterior line, posterior chain control with specificity to a neutral pelvic alignment, which is kind of where you're always swinging in and out of when you're running. So that's why I love this exercise, and that's why I brought it into this runners program, because it works so well with runners who I've given it to, and they immediately feel the benefit and feel that activation, which perhaps is difficult to get in other things. So have fun with this one. It's one of my favorites.